So I talked about the trend gauge. This was the trend gauge on the left over here in late March. This was during the tariff tantrum that the market was throwing. There were no leaders. They all had broken down. All the major indexes were below their short-term 21-day moving average, their medium-term 50-day moving average, and their long-term 200-day moving average. This is the time to get the heck out of the way and let the market sort itself out, because better days are going to be ahead. This is an example of what the trend gauge looks like right now. All market leaders are acting well. All the major indexes are above their short-term, medium-term, and long-term moving averages. So we've got the green arrows there. However, they're a little bit extended. I produced this slide last week, and we had just put on this yellow caution because historically you get a percentage above the 21-day or the 50-day, and you almost know you're going to have a pullback. So that's why we introduced these. Basically, that's saying, look, the market's extended. Now is not the time if you have a bunch of cash to pile in. Well, the market went sideways for 2.5 weeks, and we busted out of that range today. So much for my warning. But anyway, we took this one off yesterday. We're still having the medium-term one on the warning because we are still historically extended above the 50-day moving average on the NASDAQ 100 and the S&P 500. Here's that 10-step checklist coming off the bottom so I titled this 10 Steps from the Bottom to a Bull. And this mostly applies to the indexes. We use the S&P 500 as money managers as our baseline. And the first thing you want to do is regain the 8-day moving average. You can be very stretched to the downside, but you want to get the indexes regaining that downtrending 8 EMA. And then the next step is the 21-day. And around this time, you'll be 4 more days off of the low. We'll look for the classic O'Neill follow-through day. And then we don't want any distribution days to pop up after that follow-through day. So little by little, we started checking these off back in April 23rd, 24th, 22nd, 23rd for the follow-through days. Then you want the 8 to cross up through the 50, and these are all just guideposts of strength. And if they're not happening, the rally is not as strong as you maybe would have hoped it to be. Fortunately, we ended up getting all 10 of these. The last one just on July 1st, the 50-day crossed up through the 200-day. That put all the moving averages in the preferred shorter term, above medium term, above long term setup. And it was confirmed by good action in leading stocks. And I'll show a slide later how we've managed this over the last 3 months at Revere. So diving a little bit deeper now. This is the calculation that we had a data scientist who's going to come on board full-time in September, but we gave him a task as he was working part-time for us to do a bunch of back testing and determine how does the volatility of an individual name impact its, let's say, its holdability. How difficult can a stock get to hold based on its volatility and its beta? So a bunch of back tests we ran. This may look overly complicated, but it's really not. All you need is the ATR of the S&P 500, and then for any ticker, its beta and its ATR. You take 76% of the beta, 24%, 74% of the beta, 26% of the ATR, and that just gives you a number. That number's called the volatility factor, and then you divide that by the ATR of the S&P 500. So you can baseline everything against the S&P 500. The ATR, and this is kind of amazing, the ATR of the S&P 500 during this most recent bear market that we had with the tariff tantrum got up to 3.5%. Right now, it's down to 0.82%. That's also another secondary indicator that we use in our nightly videos. You want to see the ATR of the S&P ideally below a 1. That equates with a VIX of 16 or below. That's a healthy environment for the overall indexes anyway. And as we know, 75% of stocks will do what the overall market is going to be doing. So we certainly want that in our favor. So basically, that's the calculation. You get it for every individual name. You add them up, and this gives you a score for your overall portfolio. So that if you had a portfolio that was just 100% in the S&P 500, your score would be 1.00. If you had a portfolio that's 100% in the SSO ticker, that's 2 times the S&P, your score would be 2.00. So this is a way to compare the score of your portfolio versus the risk in the overall market. And typically, like right now, TurboTaxon is more aggressive than Growtection. They're around a 2. Growtection right now is around a 1.3. And it's just a matter of how aggressive you want to be with individual names, and then also the crypto-related names have a higher volatility, so they've got a higher score that translates over into your score for the overall portfolio. So this is how this is the calculation to normalize the volatility and the beta of every individual ticker. This is very similar to the prior slide where we're just showing this is a sample portfolio. This isn't our current holding, but it's the adjusted beta of each name times the size gives you the weight of the overall portfolio, or the score for the overall portfolio. Then the next question is, how volatile is the stock, and how does a position size in not so volatile stock X translate and give me the same risk to a very volatile stock Y? And we'll talk about 2 things that we have in the portfolio right now. Apple has a 1.4 volatility score. Coinbase has a 3.8 volatility score. So if you are, the way we manage portfolios, we normally have, we're kind of in here, 7 to 12 names. And if you want to balance the risk across all of the names, let's use this column here for 7 to 10. This says that a 10.71 size in Apple is equated to the same risk as a 3.95% size in Coin. So this allows you to smooth your risk across all of your individual names if you wanted to have the same risk for each individual name. Are you following me? Does it make sense the way I'm explaining it?
Yeah, can you show one more example just to really cement it?
Sure. Uber, something we just got stopped out of, has a score of a 1.8. So an 8.3% size in Uber, something else. Let's suppose you own the triple Q. That's the equivalent of owning a 3.57% size in TQQQ. In other words, over an extended period of time, the risk on a daily basis is the same for those different position sizes when you're comparing 2 different tickers with massively different volatilities.
Perfect.
Okay. So that's positional risk parity. The next thing is balance at risk. This is critical from where I sit to reducing panic during the day. And basically, what we do is we take our stop for each individual position that we have, and this is actually our current portfolio, or it was as of last Friday. We determine where our stop is. So in some cases, we're using a 10-week moving average, sometimes the 21-day, sometimes the 8-day, sometimes the 50-day. We're taking our stop, adding a little bit of a factor to it of 2 to 3%, depending on the volatility of the individual holding. So if all of our stops would get hit tomorrow, this is what the drawdown for the portfolio would be, 5.08%. Going into the trading day knowing that you can live with that certainly presents the opportunity for you not to panic when the market is plunging, because you already know, all right, if my stops get taken out, they're well thought through. I know why I put them where I put them. If they get taken out, they get taken out. That's just part of trading. So this is a snapshot on a daily basis, and then we track it, because what you want to see is as you're making progress, this starts back in June and goes through day by day up to 7/15. As you're making progress in your portfolio and you've got your balance at risk, how much money can you consider to be banked, right? What's the floor for what you've gained? So as of 7/15, gaining 13.97, you have a balance at risk of 5.48. You're going to make, since this rally started, if all your stops get hit, 8.5%. The smoke clears, you wait for the next rally, and now you're compounding your capital from a higher base than if you rode it all the way down through the bear market. So tracking those on a daily basis, you can seeing the floor rise as your returns rise. I don't know how you can not get a good feeling out of knowing that, hey, I've locked this gain in. I've accepted the risk of what I'm holding right now. Whatever happens in the market, I know what my numbers are going to be.
It's such a huge mental shift too. It gives you confidence because you know you're going to put a higher low in your equity curve. You're not going to round trip it and give it back. And that's confidence is huge when you're trading or investing. And this puts you in a win-win position, basically.
Absolutely right. That's the whole point behind it. I'm trying to take as much emotion out of the process as I can and just be mechanical. Emotions are always going to come into it. I'm a naturally conservative person. Every rule that I've made up over the years, more of them were to keep me in the market than get out of the market. You know, once you discover that you've got to a sell strategy, a sell discipline, that's a good feeling. But then sometimes that can be a nail, and you use that as a hammer to hit everything. And you say, "Look how smart I am! I'm out of the market." Well, the market just rebounded 6% yesterday, so um, overusing stops is as bad as not being long enough in the market.
Yeah, and sorry, I've got one more question. I see, in some days, it looks like your rebar was over 6%, and it's highlighted in yellow. What's kind of the range that you guys are shooting for at Grotection and Turbo as well?
What we found is for Grotection anyway, once I'm over 6%, the market is historically extended. So that's just a warning side to me that everything that I own is pretty far away from its stop on the upside. Our goal is to not draw down more than 10% from the high when we go from bull market to full-blown bear market.